This me-
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Butterfly Princess Show. This is the start of a brand new series that I've teamed up with Alyssa Mercer, who is a piano teacher based in the US, and hopefully, this will be the first series of many that myself and Alyssa collaborate on. But in this series of 6 composers, we're going to be looking at the lives of 6 composers. So the composers are Johann Sebastian Bach, um, Ludwig von Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, Frederick Chopin, and Peter Tchaikovsky. So we're going to be talking about the lives of these composers. So episode 1, now we're going to be looking at the life of Johann Sebastian Bach. Now Bach was a German composer who was a farmer and a composer during the Baroque period. In classical music, for people who are new to classical music, there were seven periods within classical music, and Baroque was one of them periods, and that is how what Bach wrote in the style of his music. Now I'm going to do this a bit differently. So Alyssa is going to share some information about the composer with us, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion. So I'm going to pass you on to Alyssa, and I'll tell you all about the German composer Johann Sebastian Bach.
and we can talk about different segments of it, but one thing I wanted to say was just how interesting it is that the different composers, some of them lived through different periods of music. So Bach was Baroque, and then Mozart, he actually taught Mozart when Mozart was 8 for about 5 months. So he was his piano teacher. So it's really interesting to see how the different composers knew each other. Some was a grandfather, some were children, some became middle aged, and they would meet in Vienna often. All the composers, if they were German, if they were English, if they were French, it was a hubbub. Vienna is still an amazing place to go visit and, learn a lot about the different composers. And then Mozart was in the classical period, and then Bach was starting into the romantic period. So it's just interesting. And they were just one generation, Bach one generation, and going into another generation, there's Mozart. Next generation, there's Beethoven. And Beethoven and Mozart might have spent about 2 weeks together in Vienna. So it's really interesting to see how they can all connect, how they might have influenced each other, how their works can be similar and yet different. Bach was lucky, also lived a long life. So back then, if you notice the lifespans of many composers, even up until the early 1900s, a lot of them had a shortened life. And they think it's because the concert halls were really cold. And if you think about COVID spreaders, right? When a lot of people meet together and there aren't vaccines and everything, it's an opportunity to get really sick. And so he's very lucky that way. He was sad though in his death because he went blind, and I think a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people know that Beethoven was deaf, but by the end of Bach's life, he was blind. And what is really interesting, in 1750, they would actually do operations to see if they could make the person see again. And he had an operation in 1750, but he had a stroke and it died. So, as all people do, eventually. I think he is the most interesting composer in some ways because he's the grandfather of all the composers. The piano as we know it was invented in his lifetime. So it's interesting to see the history of pianos. Pianos were different. At one time they were partly, they were more of a string instrument than the instrument that we know it. And there was also the pianoforte. There were pianos that didn't have as keys. If you watch movies from a long time ago, you'll notice that some of the pianos are a little different than the ones that And so the reason why he is the grandfather of it was because the piano that we know, the piano play, it wasn't invented before Bach. So I find that very interesting. He also went to school on a scholarship. So a lot of the composers came from families that were capable, or maybe they had titles. But it's interesting that a lot of them didn't have enough money to fund an entire career, that they, needed scholarships, they needed help fund them, so they would depend on royalty and, just like anybody else, they needed to make a living. And some of them were piano teachers, as, Bach taught Mozart for a while as a piano teacher. A lot of composers and concert pianists have to teach for a while, or maybe they teaching for a while until they get so famous. A lot of his songs are at churches and weddings to this day. He wrote Ave Maria. It did not have that title, but it's a song that we know. Do you like that one a lot? Do you know Ave Maria?
Yes, it's so powerful, and the reason why I love classical music so much is because I find it very relaxing. So I always like many people, I work very hard all week, and then when it comes to a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday night, it gets to about 10 o'clock at night, and I always like to put on to listen to Classic FM. That's a radio station, and they always do a segment called Classic FM, relaxing classics, and that's hosted usually by Marlene Clasp, who was a member of a band from a band, but she's also classically trained, and I always listen to that program every weekend night, because I find it very relaxing, and when I do eventually go to bed, it helps me just drift off to sleep very naturally.
Well, that's wonderful. I love that classical music does that for you. Classical music is so powerful and amazing. It actually makes you more intelligent. Learning a musical instrument, particularly classical music, can raise your IQ 7 entire points. And that's a big deal. That can make somebody go from being pretty smart to a genius. That can make somebody go from being maybe not that smart to a more smart level. Classical music plays with plants. If you play it to your plants, they've done studies. The plants flourish and they grow much more amazing when they listen to classical music. When they're introduced to heavy metal, they die and rap. It's very interesting. They've done a lot of studies about classical music. It calms children in schools. When, before taking a test, if children listen particularly to Mozart, they will actually score higher on tests. And it's calming to children too, because, I worked in a school system. So, if kids are having a rowdy day and they're rowdy and play classical music, you can calm them down. Yes. And I had a class in college, and it actually said that it was kind of like a child development class with psychology, and it basically said that to classical music can be as powerful as using Prozac, that if you listen to it and you meditate, it can make you go from being sad and depressed to happy. And weirdly, sad classical songs, or more of the morose ones, can actually lift up your mood and actually make your troubles feel like they've gone away, and you feel better after playing it or after listening to it. So I think it's very powerful. Yeah,
it does have a lot of a range of different benefits, and I suppose for mental health, obviously you mentioned Prozac there, which is sort of used as an antidepressant. It's used a lot in the UK as well as the US, and I've had a lot of mental health issues in the past, as many other people have, which is part of why I do what I do with my interviews and stuff. But to me, classical music is sort of my own sort of medicine. I mean, I like not just classical music, like you know, 80s music, Irish music, some pop, some, you know, opera sort of rock and stuff. But I've got to say my favourite sort of genre's got to be classical.
And I am the same. I love all music and I teach a lot of it, but my goal is classical. And you know, that's how I was trained, and my always are playing a classical song, you know, and then I let them choose beyond that. So they have a classical song, they have a song, they've got, you know, exercises that they have to do. And I always let them pick a song from their heart. So they can do a rock song, they can do a Taylor Swift song, they can do a Disney song, because it's important to do all, you know, all of the music.
Yeah.
But classical music is just so powerful, and I just love all the amazing effects that it can have. You know, it's so amazing. Another interesting thing that they say, like in college, was that a lot of the composers of today's movies, if you go to a movie and it didn't have the movie score, it would not be good of a movie. They say that many movies made today, maybe the reason that they're so powerful, if you have a sweeping movie like Titanic, Legends of the Fall, a lot of you know, Pride and Prejudice, a lot of these movies, the music is half of what's making it amazing. I mean, obviously the artistry, the cinematography, the costumes, they all go hand in hand. But if you didn't have a powerful sweeping musical score, or if it doesn't have one, it might not do it. That's a huge factor in how amazing the movie is. And they say a lot of the composers today that write music scores for films would have been the Mozarts. They would have been the Beethovens back then. But in today's world, that's how you're going to affect people, is the, you know, putting music into films. And one of my favorites that's around right now is Adi. He's from Italy, and some of his music's been portrayed for the Olympics and in commercials and films. And I'll even watch a commercial that makes me want to cry, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's Leonardi. His music is so powerful." And I'm sure that he would have been a Beethoven or Bach if he had lived, you know, back in the day. So it's interesting too that the song Ave Maria is interesting because Schubert did a version of it that's quite popular. It didn't have the title Ave Maria either, was Schubert, and else made it famous too. And so it's fun to see how you can take a song and different composers can make it a little different and a little bit more their own, you know. But to find out who was the original composer, I think is important too, you know. So I saw a movie called Alive. I don't know, it was from a long time ago, about a soccer team that crashed, and they had Ave Maria in that movie. And I just remember just so in awe of that song and how powerful it was, that movie. So I think that it can, you know, different songs can just be amazing in different movies. Do you have any movies that you love that you can remember the musical score that really affected you?
Well, I like the score of like I mean sort of this would be a feature of like the next of a future episode when we talk more about Chopin, who was a very good piano player. And I was first introduced to Chopin, and I really loved his music when I watched a film from 2002 called The Pianist. That is a very, very, very good emotive film. Not just because of the subject matter. Obviously, it's about, you know, a young Jewish pianist who is trying to survive in the wreckage of Poland, in, you know,
The
when his
Holocaust.
family have all in the Holocaust, when his family have all been shipped off to concentration camps. And the music of Chopin really adds to that emotive feeling in that film, I feel.
Oh, me too. Oh, for sure. I love that. It's so haunting, and that it was a true story and so powerful. So piano has definitely affected me in my life for sure. There was a song of his in Garden when I was a little girl, and I knew that I couldn't stop taking piano lessons until I at least learned that song. So I would say though that the one I like about Bach. All of the composers, most of them have one or two easier songs, and then they can have, which I would call maybe intermediate or late intermediate. And then a lot of them have early advanced songs and then advanced songs. Some of them, like Johann, almost all completely very advanced and very hard to learn how to play. And a lot of them are late intermediate or the advanced, like Mozart and Beethoven. So it's more manageable if you really stick at them, you know, follow all the rules of your piano teacher, you can absolutely do them. Bach is all over the place. He has easier ones, hard ones. Ave Maria isn't that hard to learn. I teach that to all of my students. Minuet in G is interesting. If you like movies, as I do, a lot of English movies with little girls in schools or little boys in boarding schools, you'll often see them playing minuet, like if they're in a competition or they're having a recital. That's very easy to learn. And Prelude is a little bit similar to Ave Maria, which I also find interesting because he wrote both of them. Prelude is also incredibly beautiful. And preludes are often played when people are walking into a room, you know, for church or for a funeral or for a wedding. And it's just such a beautiful song. And I just really love, I usually use Bach as my first introduction to classical music to students. And then they're often from Beethoven and learn Furlies and Moonlight Sonata, Chopin, but he's a really good start. Also, he had two sons that became composers. One of them wrote a song called Solfeggio that I teach to all my students. And that one is extremely hard to play because you have to play it really, really fast. And one interesting thing to note about classical music that's sad is I have a lot of kids that get good at music and think, oh, I'd be a concert pianist. Well, one of the reasons why kids won't get accepted to Juilliard or Berklee School of Music is another good one. Or, you know, I'm sure there's many great schools in England, is that they can't play fast. And so that kind of, I know if my student could have a career in piano, can they play Solfeggio? It's so hard. And that was Bach's son. So it's to not only see how they other, if they were friends, if they were piano teachers, the different composers. It's also interesting to see their family members and who in their family was also famous for piano or how musical was their family. Bach was a third generation composer, so he was third generation, but he was the first one to have the piano as we know it today. So I thought that was interesting. Also, they said he had a large presence. So if you look at pictures of him, you can kind of see that, and that you often knew if he was really irritated, that he would definitely let you know. So it's sometimes look at the different pictures and things from back. Wow. Have you been able to tour different places in England and see the different, you know, some different where maybe composers played some of their music or been to different concert halls or anything like that?
I mean, I love ballet, and obviously the ballets of Tchaikovsky, which again we'll speak about more in the episode about Tchaikovsky. But I would really love to go to a classical music concert and, you know, to hear them live and things like that. Sort of thing, sort of thing that's really interesting for me to learn about these different composers and different elements of classical music is that I'm sort of a member of an organisation called the Teaching Company, and that is an American company. Deliver something called the Great Courses. This is an app that people can download, and, you know, from the App Store or Google Play Store, they can download the app onto the device, and you have to pay a subscription each month or whatever, quarterly, and then they have different courses on on different areas. So it's not like courses that you do in school or college or university. You can just sit and listen to them or watch them, and they're all delivered by experts or professors in their particular field. And one of the categories is music, and there is a very good professor who delivers most courses on classical music, and that's a lecturer called Robert Greenberg, and he has actually delivered quite a number of these courses for the teaching company, and they're really informative. You know, each episode, each individual lecture in each different categories, usually about 30 minutes long, but with Robert Greenberg's individual lectures in his different series, they're sort of really about 40 to 45 minutes long, and he goes really in depth about, you know, the life of the composer or the type of music, and he doesn't just tell the audience about the music. He actually has you listening to different pieces of music, so you can really get a feel of it. I'm currently listening to a course by Robert Greenberg at the moment, called How to Listen to and Understand Opera. Now, opera, I've always sort of wanted to delve into it, but I've never sort of felt confident to really explore it because I haven't really understood it. But since I'm only a few lectures into this series, but since listening to it and hearing, you know, Robert Greenberg's explanations of it, it's made me really want to explore opera and go and see an opera live for myself, because he really tells you the stories behind the operas. Like, up to now he's told you the story behind the opera George Bizet's opera of Carmen and the Barber of Seville, so you get a real in-depth feel of what classical music and what opera is as well.
It's so amazing to be able to go and, you know, see your favorite things performed by the best in the world, you know? That's just incredibly amazing. I'm so lucky that I live in Seattle, and, you know, I've had a lot of opportunities to go to symphonies, orchestras, and, you know, I've met a pianist, and it's just fascinating. So fun to see it come to life, you know? So, yeah, but that is pretty much, you know, what I try to do with kids is just make it really relatable. So, you know, where you're going to go to a college lecture to an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, they're not going to understand. And so what I've always done is just try to make the stories really interesting and make it really relatable so that they remember, you know, oh, Bach was the grandfather, you know, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, so is that it for that now?
That's pretty much it for Bach. But that was amazing that he had such a long life, and you know, if it wasn't for Bach, he really wrote some of the most incredible music. And if you listen to all the different time periods and, you know, eras of music, they definitely have, you know, the Baroque sound or the classical sound or the romantic sound. But I find that all of them have truly just amazing pieces that break your heart, or just it make you feel amazing or influence you, or you just love. And I don't think it matters what time period from. I think all of them just have a number of them that just touch all of us to this day, you know. And for sure Bach with his obviously you know, he was very choral. He was most known for his choral. And it's also interesting to see how, you know, Tchaikovsky, he was, you know, for ballet, and so how they might have influenced different, you know, types of classical music as well. So, yeah.
So thank you for tuning in, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed episode 1 of classical composers, and we've been discussing Johann Sebastian Bach. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.
I'll stop the record. now.